Hello, hello. Let's get everybody on stage and just make sure that you are unmuted. I think everybody is, but just to check.
Hope
All
so.
right.
Hey.
Yay.
Hello. Yeah.
All right. So if we've never heard of Nuxt Insiders, who and what is Nuxt Insiders?
I really want to know this definition too, though, because I know I'm joining the Discord server where it says Nuxt Insiders, but is there any solid definition of Nuxt Insiders? Like who is Nuxt Insider and who is not?
Okay, I can give a more formal definition of Nuxt Insiders. Basically, Nuxt Insiders are people that have been recognized by the Nuxt team for their involvement in the Nuxt community. And well, that's the definition. It's the one that is written on paper, which is quite boring, and there's no strict guidelines. But basically, the people that are really active and involved in Nuxt community and get reached out to join the crew of Insider, which is not a place that we intend to gatekeep or to be really exclusive. Just that those are the current people that are really interested nowadays in being involved in the Nuxt community. And nowadays we're about 20 of us, including some Nuxt members.
Can you name all 20?
A little bit. I would add a little definition to it as well, because we also have the ambassadors. So we have the insiders and ambassadors. Some of them are both. Some of them are mainly ambassadors. Some of them are mainly insiders. And there is also Alex, who is maintainer. But I would add that the insider is someone who is doing the contribution to the core framework, or for example, is maintaining the modules or plugins or anything else, while the ambassador focuses mainly on the content itself. So for example, recording tutorials or writing articles. I would maybe add something like this to the definition as well, but what you mentioned, Lucie, was completely correct.
Yeah, I think
all right, Alex.
Don't forget about the library authors as well. So you don't have to necessarily contribute to the core. It's also good if you write a Nuxt module, for example, or contribute to documentation as well. Yeah, generally just get involved with the ecosystem, and take part in that. And I think that's more or less the idea behind it.
I dig it. Can any of you name all of the insiders?
Well, I have the list in front of my eyes, but I'm not sure it's really interesting.
This is what I wanted to do. Lucie, Kia, Eduardo, Alex, V.
Well, basically, it's all of us, some Nuxt team members, and some people that aren't here because we had to make a choice in who were coming here.
I love it. All right, next question. What is one of the contributions you've made that you're most excited about?
I can go. So for me, it will be the one that I also did the Mighty Bytes, but I'm not sure if it was shown yet. Maybe it will be. So the Nuxt add, which is a new command for the CLI that allows you to create templates of certain files. So components, pages, layouts, you can just generate them by using the CLI and just going with the command Nuxt add, and for example, component, plugin, layout, whatever. So I find it really useful, and I'm really glad that it went to the core framework and the Nuxt as well.
I dig it. I feel like I want to pick on Eduardo or Kia right now because neither one of you have talked very much in the last question.
I think Eduardo should go. I haven't made any critical contribution to Nuxt framework or other plugins, but we did have discussion about Vuex. When we migrate Vuex 4 to Vue 3, and we have to think about Vuex 5 and how we can integrate Vuex 5 with, especially how to server-side render the state management. And Vuex 5 is now Pinia, and Pinia had a Nuxt module before we had, I mean, it has its own Nuxt module, but I think one of the big like integration point was like Pinia and Nuxt, right? So Eduardo, how did that go?
I think it wasn't the easiest of the paths because it was all like we're using the bridge Nuxt 2, Nuxt 3 module stuff.
Yeah.
So it was all very experimental. It was breaking from release to release. And I'm glad I had help from Daniel and Puya because I wouldn't have made it otherwise. And I think at some point we dropped Nuxt 2 in some of the versions of the plugin because it was just not possible to support Nuxt 2, Nuxt Bridge, and Nuxt 3 at the same time. But you were working on some SSR stuff that would convert and revive refs and reactive, I remember. And then the end, I don't know if that became something.
Yeah, I have to pick up that one and do it really.
Do it.
Yeah, I need to.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if I've added things to Nuxt 3. I don't think I have made any PR. I think I just review some PRs of the router and stuff like that.
That's also contribution. That counts as well.
Yeah, I guess.
And I believe I might have cut you off, Lucie, when you were gonna say something about this as well.
No worries, but I can pick up from here. Well, the contribution I made that I'm the most proud of for Nuxt 3 is the Nuxt link component. So like the components that you use to link to different pages, we had some ideas as to like how to improve it in Nuxt 3 compared to what it was in Nuxt 2. And well, I went through that and implemented the first version of the component, which has evolved a bit since then, but that's open source. And yeah, I'm still really proud of that contribution I made.
Very cool.
It was
Very cool.
nice RFC. So definitely.
Thanks.
I feel like this question really does lead into our next question of like, what's the best way to start contributing? Because if you might be talking to like noobs that are dealing with, just had Hacktoberfest, or people that have really been in the field for a long time but maybe new to open source. How would you say people should get started contributing?
So you would like to go first, because I would like to add some words from myself as well.
Well, go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, so I wanted to say how not to do that, because I did like few times in a wrong way. So the Nuxt ad is a perfect example, because what Lucie did with Nuxt Link is the RFC, right? And what I did is I just developed it and it was working, and I showed the result to Puya and he said, man, this looks nice. Let's just add some new things to it. So basically my recommendation would be to first check if something like this doesn't exist yet, because I also did almost create a whole page RFC of the functionality that was already added. So make sure to check it out first. And the next, create RFC, because then the core team can check it out and give you some hints on whether to do it in that way or maybe another one. I would say that the RFC is a great idea to start contributing.
Yeah, if I may add to that, writing a full-blown RFC might be a bit daunting to get started. And if you just want to get started and get involved with the community, it's quite boring, but the best way is that when you contribute to a framework like Nuxt, Vue, or really like any other open source project out there, just to put the effort into nicely documenting the issue of feature requests you're suggesting, because this would make the maintainer's life way easier to understand what you need, what's not going well, and how to fix it as soon as possible. Moving on, if you'd like to really contribute code to a framework like Nuxt, in the case of Nuxt, really the best way to contribute in a not so daunting or impressive way, for you, is to look at modules. Nuxt modules are a huge part of Nuxt, and there are hundreds of modules out there. You can contribute to the module you like by fixing issues or like creating new features, those code bases are usually like much smaller and easier to apprehend as someone gets started and involved in open source and in the community.
Great. Anyone else want to contribute before I go to the next question?
I want to pick something up from the chat, actually. So one user wrote there, first step, find a problem you need solved. So that's also a good point. Like, yeah, where do I actually look at? And as Lucie mentioned, yeah, if there's no module for what you want to do, and it's a functionality that some people might need, then go ahead and create a module. But also, if you feel like, oh, I'm reading documentation and there is something missing, or I feel like there could be some depth added here and there, then yeah, you can also write an issue, or of course fork the documentation and add what you can add to that too. So it doesn't even have to be code all the time. It can be like formulating nice issues, saying, okay, this is missing, or when I read that page, it felt like a bit yeah, shallow, or yeah, just add content and documentation too. And this is very important for everyone who's learning Nuxt.
Great, thank you. And yeah, a lot of these questions, and yes, y'all feel free, please put your questions in the chat. We may not be able to get to all of them. We have had some that have been asked that we have listed out. Please keep adding them though, because if we have the time, we would love to get to them. Because the next one I have up for y'all is actually, what is the best resources for creating a Nuxt module?
Other Nuxt module. I mean, that's the best one, I think. Go into small Nuxt module and look into the source code, and you find lots of good techniques. So especially the official ones, I would say.
Besides that, I think also the Nuxt module builder will help a lot, because that's like the kind of boilerplate to get started. So you can like get started with a very simple setup and evolve from there and see, oh, what do I have to like take care of when I write a module? And there's also, as Lucie just posted, the module author's guide. So feel free to tell something about that, Lucie.
Yes. Well, modules are quite simple to get started with. And yeah, like, well, as Kia said, like, well, the best way like to learn more about module is to just look at other modules code. But just to get started from nothing, like the best way is still, I think, like to just have a look at the module guide, which doesn't go like in great depth into what you can do with module. And that's where like looking at source code becomes really helpful. But yeah, like to get started and like just have a project for module running, like there's a command for that. It's all documented, the documentation. And to pick up more advanced pattern and be able to do anything with your module, then, well, you'll have to look at source code for now.
All right.
Which don't be afraid to do. It's not like that terrible.
I dig it. I dig it. And we have a lot of questions around modules. And so I'm just trying to go through them and see if any really stick out. But let's see. We'll go with this one. What are some of the main hurdles when developing modules in Nuxt for both client and server side?
So I can jump on this one. I would say that, for example, in my case, I had this issue with the Algolia module that the third-party library that I was using, the official Algolia search package, it doesn't work, for example, when you want to have it like full SSR. So for some cases, you might just run into a situation where you won't be able to develop them both server side and client side. So in that case, I would just focus on the client side. That's my recommendation. Maybe it might not work for everyone, but it's the first thing that came to my mind in terms of this question.
All right. Anyone else?
I think I will say the state management. So you constantly have to think about which code runs on which environment. And usually, like when you create a simple state, it's okay to run them both on client and server side. If the both code runs twice, and if the result is the same, there's no problem. But sometimes you only want to run some code on server side only and not in client, But sometimes you want to run only on the client, only on the server. So you have this so much mixed patterns. And also, if you want to run some code on server side and pass that data to the client, you have to be able to serialize those data. So that means you can't use functions, or you can't have like class object. The object has to be POSIO. And that's kind of simple to say, but sometimes very simple native element can't also be used on these kind of situations, right? For example, when you have a data object or file object, like those are not POSIO, but there's no POSIO version of those data, right? I mean, for the date, you can have string type, string date, but what are we going to do is file? And so that's the, I think, hard one. And there's no like best practice or solid answer to fix this problem, because it depends on what kind of application you're building or what kind of library you're building. So I think that's the biggest part, for me at least, the hardest part when building universal application, where you constantly have to think about what runs on what environment, and which you don't have to think about when you're only writing a client-side code.
I would also like to add, thinking about the rendering mode itself, because server-side rendering can now mean like lots of things. Are we like using like pre-rendering to pre-render all the routes? Do we use hybrids? What's the thing here? And for example, for like a sitemap, just like creating a sitemap, there was a module for Nuxt2, and Daniel Rowe, who we mentioned quite some time now, wrote a great article about that. I just linked that in the chat as well. Yeah, which is basically about, okay, how you can do that when you pre-render your routes. Like just say, hey, okay, if it's a full static site anyway, just use a module that outputs that XML file. But if you need it dynamically, then you need a Nitro server endpoint that renders that on the fly or cached or whatever. So also keeping that in mind, and especially switching that like paradigm view from like Nuxt2 of, okay, full static site generation versus on the fly versus on the client side. Now keeping all the moving parts in mind, I think that's also can be tricky.
All right. And I think that does, especially like with the rendering and going a bit deeper, because like thinking about hydration, who's the most passionate about hydration? Because I'm going to put this question to you. Anyone?
Eduardo.
Yay!
Yeah. He's in Kia here. Like.
All right. So, like, what are the plans to improve hydration? Maybe add hydration utilities for Nuxt 3 for optimization, like lazy hydrate, or get rid of hydration completely, kind of like quick.
So the problem with this kind of question is that it's too vague. Hydration issues. What hydration issues? So I think people are saying, the people who say remove it like quick, maybe they don't realize that what quick does is just a rebranding of hydration. It's not, they call that resumable something. It's just this, it's just a different name for the what would be the right word in English? Same concept, different name, same idea, different concept. Is still hydration. Reasonability is still hydration, still reviving some of the application. The performance difference wasn't that big after digging into the benchmarks. And as always, well, lately the benchmark has been really shitty. Sorry for the word, but they're really terrible, like terrible benchmark published in by different people, even respectable ones. And then when you get to dig into them, you realize that they are all flawed, because every person is going to use their own point of view to boost the performance point key they want to boost and say, hey, look how my thing is faster. So I think, to me, the iteration issues right now that we have is more in the debugging. So how hard it is when you have an iteration mismatch. And I'm not the one in charge of improving the iteration issues. But if it was, that would be the things I would try to improve. Performance, as always, has to be proven bad. Like there is always room for improvement, and as we say, but priorities, like sometimes that's not where you're gonna get. Sometimes you are losing performance in other places, and it's just such a broad question, so vague. To me, mismatch hydration is the place to.
I get it. I'm posting this in the chat as well. I mentioned early in the conference that I've had Mishko on Teach Gen Tech to talk about it. And this is when I didn't even know what like hydration was or anything, or like rendering halfway through or server side. And I posted this video because it is the bare basics of what Quick does. And I think that's a great way to compare, because sometimes when we compare it to something we know, it can make it easier to understand. And everything I'm learning about Nuxt, I'm like, this is so cool. So thank you for that. And yes, sometimes answering the big questions are hard to do. Let's see. Where do you write an RFC? Is the Nuxt RFC repo to make a PR to? Is there? I feel like that might be an Alex question.
I think Lucie answered it in the answers already. In the discussion tab of the GitHub discussions for Nuxt framework or the submodule, feel free to like open it up there. If there are for some reason no discussion tabs there, then use an issue. That's also fine. But yeah, for Nuxt framework, go in there. There's a category for that and write that up. Usually to get like some fine tuning before like writing the big RFC, get in touch with the people, maybe even open an issue with like, hey, I have an idea for this feature. What do you think? General feedback before writing the whole RFC. Because as it was mentioned before, it's quite some work and it should be nice. So yeah, keep that feedback loop going and going.
And thank you for that. As you can see, I'm not used to having multiple people on at the same time, being able to answer the questions there too. So yay. And great call. Now, I would say something that definitely is sticking out is this one's a bit of a longer one. So both won't fit on the screen. So I'll read it. It seems that component libraries like Vuetify, Vuefy, Core UI, Prime Vue, etc. don't work well with Nuxt 3 yet. It's not an easy as expected to set them up and combine the combination with Nuxt 3. Tailwind is used a lot and seems to work great, but is this component approach dead? Or I'll share the second part. Is this component approach dead, or is there a plan to better support at Nuxt 3? Could you recommend which of the libraries to use?
Not sure what this is. This component. Oh, sorry, I didn't understand quite a bit about this. Is this component approach dead? I mean, what is component approach?
Component libraries. Here's the first part.
Oh, so component approach means using component libraries with Nuxt. Okay.
Yeah. I'll put it back to the
Okay,
slide.
sorry, Jakub, please go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to jump on this one because in both current company and the previous one, I was working with Vuetify, and I can't really say that I recommend it because basically when I joined, I started rewriting the whole stuff from Vuetify based to like pure Vue based or Nuxt based, and it's typically because of the fact that these component libraries, they are great for the MVP stage of your project, I would say. Like when you need to build something fast, like the proof of concept or portfolio page or whatever, you need to make it very fast, like develop it very fast. These component libraries are great. But if you are developing a bigger app, you might run into a situation like we had several times that you have to create a workaround on top of a workaround to make this component from a library work as expected. Because, for example, it works, like in documentation, you can read that it works perfectly, but then you add it to another place, like when they say that you can put it anywhere, and you put it anywhere, and it doesn't work. Strange. And so I would say that this, at least in my case, I would recommend going for component libraries when you have this like simple project, or when you need to develop it very fast. However, if you need to make a bigger application, like a long-term project, I don't know, 1 year, 2 years, or even longer, I would stick with what was the second part of the question. So going with, for example, Tailwind. So pure Vue components developed by the team that match the need of the project, and customizable by using Tailwind. That's my take on that.
All right. I feel like, even though people are definitely asking questions and we're getting there, what are all of you most passionate about with Nuxt? And like, what made you want to use Nuxt over everything else? Because this thing that, at least from newbie point of view, it's like, what framework do you learn, and why are you going to learn a framework, and why are there people that are the insiders and ambassadors and all of these different levels? Like, what made you choose Nuxt?
Because it has the easiest server-side rendering feature, for me at least. So I wanted to build a website, and I needed to have server-side rendering just because I wanted to have social media previews rendered. And my site couldn't have been static site generation because it was dynamic. So I needed to have server-side rendering. And if you want to build server-side rendering app from plain Vue or plain Vue, for example, it's very, very, very hard. And it's just almost impossible. So Nuxt is, if you want to have server-side rendered app, I think Nuxt is like way to go. I mean, there's no other choice. I mean, just go with Nuxt. So I think for me, that's the biggest and most important reason why I'm using Nuxt right now.
All right. I'm going to pick on all of you for this one. So we got server-side rendering, and that definitely does make sense. So let's go with Lucie, just because you're like the order of the screen. I'll go there.
Okay, well, I started with Nuxt like a long time ago, and back then, like the reason I picked up Nuxt, well, as Kia said, it was the only framework in Vue that provided like a strong server-side rendering experience. And in our case, like we're trying like to migrate away from WordPress, like some kind of like WordPress headless, and we were able like to plug Nuxt in front of it with its server-side rendering feature. But nowadays, the reason I picked Nuxt is that it's just like the most comprehensive set of tools to build any kind of website out there, really. So unless I know that I'm making like a short-lived website, like just like a landing page or something that I notice like has the scope really precise that I know won't evolve in time, like I'm just going with Nuxt because I know that whatever falls under my plate, like I will be able to handle it with Nuxt neatly and conveniently, thanks to all the tools that Nuxt provides to you, and also all the modules that are here to empower you to build any kind of application with Nuxt.
Great. And there are more questions coming up in the chat, and I'm loving this because it's like going into deeper layers of everything y'all are saying. And also, yes, audience, beautiful humans listening and watching, I am asking you this as well, because it's important for the community to understand why Nuxt is, why we've chose Nuxt. Like, why are we going to go into it further? Why contribute to it? So let's go next. I'm going to go out of order. Alex.
Yes. So similarly to Kia, I came because of server-side rendering, but I stayed for all the rest. Like Nuxt 2 back then had already amazing features that was like really distinguishing it from plain Vue. And I think with Nuxt 3, it stepped up just by how easy deployment is, that it works across like all major platforms, that you can just put up things statically or just use a Node.js server, but it can also work on the edge on Cloudflare workers and soon also on Deno. So being not vendor locked into any platform is like a huge plus. And I think that's one feature I definitely like to highlight, besides all the nice developer experience as well. But yeah, that's the one thing for sure.
All right. Let's go, Eduardo.
To me, it's all the things out of the box, and like defaults and SSR. That's it.
I like that y'all are like so to the point. It's like there's no bullshitting or anything or fluff. I mean, I do think that is like the tech industry in general, like, but still, it is fantastic. Jacob, all you.
So in my case, it will be something similar to what Alex said. So I came for the developer experience, and I stayed because of the developer experience. It's like the amount of stuff and then the amount of time that the Nuxt core team is spending on making the tool even better and even easier for the developers to use. It's amazing. And it always, when I look at the PRs, when some of the core team members are just releasing a pull request where they just say, okay, right now, in case you want to use this function or this method or this composable, you can use it and you don't have to remember about adding something like a key or whatever, like with use async data. It will now be generated automatically for you based on some condition. And then it will be like, as I said, done automatically. So you don't have to take care of it. It's like you are introduced to a concept that already works. And then there is another concept on top of the previous one that works the same way, but requires you to do less steps. There are no better feeling for the developer when you find out that you can do the same thing with less steps. Basically, that's it.
I feel like that is a really good way of saying it too, and also why people would want to use it. All right. So another one that we got from the audience is how to support clean architecture pattern like modular architecture on the Nuxt.js Nuxt project instead of monolithic.
Clean architecture, does this mean that you usually have on a backend, like the DDD kind of thing? You have, I think, for example, container and repository and domain model and that kind of stuff. Does anyone do that on the front end?
Yeah, I think that goes in the direction actually of a talk later I've heard about, where it's actually about, if you have Nuxt folder structure, it's rather flat. You put like pages on pages, components on components, and at some point you might want to reuse some stuff of that. So you might want to say, hey, some pages maybe belong to, let's say, a shop module, and I don't know, I'm building a web application for different clients and different instances, and some should have the shop module and some not. So setting that up is easy with Nuxt 3. It was a bit more complicated, and the extends feature will make a key appearance here for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure if my understanding of clean architecture and the questioner's clean architecture is the same thing, but I think the hardest thing for the front end, not only for the Nuxt, but front end to have clean architecture is to have dependency injection. Because usually clean architecture, you have a container and everything, domain model and repository and any other services are connected by interface, not the implementation, so that you can always switch the exact implementation afterwards, right? But in the backend, you can do that by creating single container that connects the interface and the implementation. But if you do that in front end, that means you're going to load all the JavaScript every time on every page. So you don't want to do that, right? That's why we have like code splitting and that kind of stuff. And usually this kind of problem doesn't exist on backend, because in backend you can use like as much module as you want, but in front end you have to always like cut down the bundle size, right? So I think that's the big reason why clean architecture is not that famous in front end, because you want to reduce the code size, but clean architecture kind of enforces you to have more codes. And like, so I don't think it's really a good idea for the JavaScript to do it, unless it's a Node.js app. But if you want, I don't see any hurdle to do it. I mean, technically. You can do this like exact same thing, right?
If you don't do it like exactly as in the backend, but just like adapted for the front end to do it like just more modularized, I think it's also very common in Angular, where you have like, okay, you have a module and there's, for example, your page, your component, your composables, your middleware in there, and you load these things on demand. Then that totally makes sense at some point, especially if you want to reuse stuff. So I see patterns, especially for like growing apps, definitely make sense in that direction. But as you just mentioned, of course, it's not the idea to like load all the things at once and then like decide on runtime. So maybe at build time, that would be already a nice idea.
Thank you. Thank you. And all right. So this is going to be the second to the last question because we are getting pretty close to time. And I just want to check. We just got a question in here. It looks like we already got replies on it. Wow. I don't know if it's y'all or the community, but you guys are answering them really quickly. I dig it. Let's do this one. For Nuxie? Is that yes. All right. I was going to get there. I'm already like, if anybody watches my live stream, I am horrible at words. And I feel like this is like, people are excited that I have to read this all out loud. Because I'm like, I'm horrible at words. So this is going to be great. So Nuxie offers a Nuxie analyze command. What does it do and how can I use it to improve the performance of my Nuxt 3 application?
Okay. So, well, Nuxie, if you're not familiar with it, it's the Nuxt 3 CLI. And the analyze command is it's not a new thing. It's something we've had back with Nuxt 2 under a flag, the analyze flag. And now it's about to be a command of its own. And basically, it's a command to analyze the bundle of your application. So what does this mean? That when you build your application, you build like a bundle for your application. And there's this notion of chunking, that basically is like splitting all your JavaScript code into categorized, like organized, like JavaScript files that will get shipped to production. And this analyze command allows you to analyze each of those chunks and see what library you're using is taking a lot of room inside those chunks. So basically, you analyze like what is heavy JavaScript-wise in my application, and so this allows you to get a better picture of what might impact the performance of your application JavaScript-wise, and allow you to take decision and action of like, well, like how can I mitigate that? Do I really need to use that big library? Maybe there's like a more modern one that is much like smaller. Or maybe, well, there's also some like more advanced technique. You can like decide to lazy load part of your application, and like this will get done. For example, like this is really common. Well, just giving an example, like on this, like having like a search bar on your website, like maybe you don't want to download everything related to search unless someone clicks on the search and starts searching for something. So that's something you can decide to do. So yeah, like long story short, the analyze command allows you to analyze your bundle, and that's something you might want to do when you're at the stage that you start to hunt for performance and see what you can optimize within your application.
Thank you. Anyone have anything to add to that one? I feel like you answered it really well, but just to make sure.
I used to write about it because it's really cool.
Yay! Yay! Okay. Well, very last question before we go to the giveaways and then a quick break of, I feel like y'all already know what the question is, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is something y'all are grateful for? I'm picking on every single one of you. It's going to be great.
To be in this community, I guess.
I like it. I like it. All right. I'll go while you guys are thinking on it and noodling on it. I would say I'm grateful for how welcoming this community is. Just for being a newbie, like I've been coding for four or 5 months now, and like being a developer advocate. And yes, I can talk to anybody. I got that. I have a show, Teach Gen Tech, but like there's a difference between when people answer questions and answering them just to get the answer out or wanting to teach. And that is something that I found so beautiful about this community is people want to teach, and which makes it much more welcoming. So I'm very grateful for that. Lucie, I see you unmuted.
Okay. Well, I'm grateful to be working in a company that allows me to prepare and be present at that kind of event and be involved with the community overall.
All right. Eduardo, I'm picking on you.
I think there are way too many things to be grateful for. So if I take something not from the community and other things, I would say my parents for educating me well, or I appreciating how my parents raised me, I guess. I don't know, anything can be. Today, I mean, personally, I'm grateful for a lot of things. So everyday life also. So
I love that. All right, Jacob.
So I will say one thing that Alex most probably knows already, because when we were in Berlin, he was announcing me and he was giving this interesting fact about me.
Oh yeah.
So I'm grateful that recently me and my girlfriend decided to adopt 2 small cats. And
Aww.
this is a game changer in terms of how do you spend your time after work.
Are there photos of the kittens or cats? Like, can we definitely now need to go follow you on Twitter to see if there's pictures of cats.
I don't think there is, but I might post it after the Insiders panel.
Do it.
We'll do that.
Yes.
They're so cute.
Alex, all you.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for Jakub's 2 cats. No, but seriously, I think I'm very grateful for Vue and Nuxt in general, because otherwise we wouldn't be right here where we are, talking about these amazing pieces of technology that so many people use and utilize in their day-to-day job. So yeah, definitely that.
Yay! And thank you all so much for being on the panel today and answering questions. I know that I can only imagine that y'all have been here all day and are answering questions in the chat, because that is such a big, important part of community, and also be able to work together to make this happen. So once again, thank you all. And up next, we get to talk about the giveaways. So go follow everybody on Twitter. Go hit them up. Ask them lots of questions. It'll be fun. Thank you all.